So I'm going to touch base on, introduce just the automation rules that we're going to actually go through. One of the requests was automating duplicate ticket detection and linking. Sorry, that was a hard thing for me to say. We're also going to talk about how to write, let's say, a Jira system field to a custom field. We're going to use smart values to be able to parse email requests to auto set information on tickets, whether it's setting the request type, adding information to a summary, things of that sort. We're going to talk about, we're also going to go through the ability to do auto reminders and auto closure after a sort of inactivity, and how you compare your SLAs with an automation rule to kind of achieve this clean environment and making sure you don't have stale tickets. In this case, we're going to specifically look at JSM. And then we'll wrap it all up. There was a request to basically, how do we make automation rules more targeted so that they don't run on every ticket that gets created, that it's only running on specific tickets, because that can eat up your usage, especially if you're on the standard or premium plans, or even the free plan, but really there's plans that have the limit on how many times you can run an automation rule, and you don't want to eat that up unnecessarily. So we'll talk about that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. These rules I've already built them out and obviously tested them. So for the sake of time, because we only have 1 hour, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through every part of that automation rule, and then we're going to demo it. So let me go ahead and switch this screen out. Entire screen. Right. Go ahead. Okay, so here we have, let me go back to, we'll start with the queue. So here we are, we're doing this in JSM because most of the requests kind of focused on specific request types, and that's usually related to JSM, but a lot of this, with the exception of the rules that align with SLAs, can be done in a general Jira software project. Let me make sure that this visual, zoom in, let's reset that. Okay, so we've got some test tickets here. As I showed in the slide, so the first automation we're going to go through is merging duplicate tasks. Let's open up this rule here. In this rule, so the actual request from the user was, is there a way to automate linking duplicate tickets together or merging them so that they are part of one ticket without having to manually add them? Not sure how this would work or what conditions can be used for this. Great question. Lots of potential use cases for needing to merge duplicates. One I can think of off the top of my head is specifically within JSM. Say you have an outage of something, any sort of system outage in an incident, and you're receiving multiple tickets on the same incident that you know about, and you don't want to have 10 tickets or multiple tickets that you have to go and update every single one. So we're going to go through excuse me, the process of merging any of those duplicate tickets into a main ticket where you can just update that one main ticket and it will notify the users and what that looks like. So for this specific one, because duplicates can happen at any time, the way we've automated this is instead we're doing a manual trigger. So our trigger is going to be a manual one. So when you're going in and you're setting up that automation rule, that's the trigger you're going to use, is manual. You can restrict who can run the trigger. You can also restrict on what issue types that trigger shows up for. So for this, I've restricted it to the issue type, the service request one. And then I've also asked, because we want to link it to a main ticket, for user input. And so you'll check that, and it will then bring up this section right here. You'll have a couple of different options to select here. For this, I did the short text. And why is because we want to link and bring over information to a very specific ticket. So that user input, the user is going to need to know, and the user at this point is going to be the agent. So the agent needs to know what's the main ticket that I need to link this to. And so we've put in field name, but we've also given some instructions, essentially like, please enter the exact issue of the primary ticket. And then we've given it a variable name. Now we're going to use this, basically putting in the variable name will create it in a way like they do smart values. And we're going to use it further in the rule. So we've put this in, and again, I've noted to prompt for input because we need to identify exactly what ticket we want to link the duplicate to. Now, this specific rule, what it is going to do is it's going to, when it gets triggered manually, it is going to then prompt whoever triggered the automation to input a value. And it's going to ask for the value of the primary ticket, the ticket that you're like, hey, this is the one we're doing all the communication on, and that's the one that we want to use. Everything else we want to close out, mark it as a duplicate, and then only have that one so that our queues are clean and we also know communication. What it's also going to do, it's going to add the description of that duplicate ticket. It's going to add it to the description of the main ticket. So all of those reported issues that appear to be related to the same incident are in one description. And then it's also going to add the reporter of that duplicate ticket as a participant on the main ticket so that they can get notified of changes and updates that happen to the ticket. So we've set up the manual trigger and we've asked for the input. We've named the variable. In this case, you want to name it something very clear. So it's pretty simple as you're building out the rule, and we've called it main ticket. Now I've used a branch so that we can add to it, but essentially we need to ostracize exactly what ticket we want to do the linking to. So in this case, the related issue, we've made the issue key is equal to the user input because we've asked for the user input to be the exact issue key of the main ticket. So they'll put that in. We've restricted it just to this project. We don't do it globally. And then, so that's the branching that we're going to do. And then we're going to say for that specific issue, we're then going to link the issue by a specific link. In this case, I've chose is duplicated by and the trigger issue. So it'll link to the main ticket, this duplicate issue. So it'll be visible there. And then we've chosen to set the reporter, or add the reporter to the current issue for the request participants. That's so they get updates. And then we've put in here using some smart values. We have the issue description of the main ticket. And then underneath it, we've put the description from the trigger issue, which would have been the duplicate ticket, and that description. So it's going to add it to the description of the main ticket. And then for the ticket that was the duplicate, we're going to add a comment that basically says, hey, we're going to close this because it's a duplicate. You'll continue to receive updates on the main ticket. Again, that's that user input that we're able to use throughout the rule. We've also selected that this prevents duplicates, so it only adds it once. And we'll make sure that this visibility is share with customer. And then the final piece of this is we're going to, the duplicate ticket, which is where we're going to trigger the automation, is going to get resolved. So we're going to resolve it, and we're also going to set the resolution to duplicate. So that way it really just tidies up, closing out that ticket and merging all of that information to the main ticket. So I'm going to update this. Let's go back to our queue. Okay, so we have our duplicate task primary ticket here. This is the main ticket that we've been adding duplicate tasks to. And I'm going to make note specifically of this issue key. Now I have another duplicate task here. In this case, that manual automation, because we're triggering it manually, this comes in and I'm like, oh, hey, this is a duplicate for this other ticket. Let me go grab that key. And then I'm going to trigger merge duplicates. It's telling me exactly what to put in here. In this case, there's the key. I'm going to hit continue. What that's going to do is it's going to trigger the automation. So we can view here that we have the automation is running currently. Okay, so I've come back to it. This was the duplicate ticket. You can see here that I've linked it to the primary task. The automation linked it to the primary task. It added that comment with the link to the new task. It resolved it, marked it as duplicate. Now let's make note. There's this description and then the reporter. We're going to click on the main primary ticket and we can see here, okay, this is the description from this other duplicate task, and here's the information from that. And then we can also see, this should have updated, but Selena would get added here as a participant. And that is essentially what you would do to merge duplicate tickets. And it can, being a manual trigger, it can run on any of the issues that you identify. I have restricted it to just the service desk one or service request ones. In this case, the Get IT Help is a service request ticket. All right, let's go back to our all open queue. And now that's how you would do the duplicate task. Let's refresh this and you can see the log file that we had success. And you can expand that and see further what exactly did it do, who triggered the rule, all of that. All right. So that is how do we merge duplicate tickets. Now we're going to go through the automation of writing information to a custom field. This is helpful if you want to surface that information, say in a dashboard or a report, because some system fields are not, like, you can't surface them. That's just not, or they don't really exist. The system information is there, but now we need to write that information to a field that we can do something with. So the actual user request was, can we write the last updated by value to a field so it can be shown in queues? For this one, we'll have a couple of steps that will need to happen. So first and foremost, we'll need to create the custom field. And this could be a text field, or in this case, because we want to identify the last user who made the update, I'm going to use a user picker field. So we'll go ahead and open this up, go to our custom fields. I've created the field already, but I'll show you that it is a user picker single user, because we don't want to add, in this case, it's just best to show the last person who made the update. I've added it to all of the screens and it's in the project that we need it to be in for it to work. So that is called last updated by. Now, what does that rule look like? So it's a very simple rule in relation to the other one that I sent. The trigger for this rule is going to run whenever the issue is updated. There's a challenge with this, especially if you're on the standard version or you have premium with a limited licensing, is that this rule, it is project specific, but it's going to run every time an issue gets updated. If one issue gets updated 20 different times, that is going to run 20 times. And so that's something to be mindful of when you're building out your rules or choosing what to automate, is understanding, excuse me, is understanding your limitations. And if you, and seeing what the usage is on it. So this would be a high usage automation rule because we're not restricting on what it runs on. If you wanted to say, hey, you want to put some conditions in there and say when an issue is updated, but only for, say, change requests or only for certain work items, then it would be more limited on how many times it runs. But in this case, the trigger is going to be when an issue is updated. Then, and with this one, we'll use a smart value and then set the custom field. So in this case, when an issue is updated, we're then going to edit the issue. And that custom field that I created, last updated by, that's the field we're going to choose to set. And then the smart value is going to be the initiator. Reason why it's going to be the initiator is that because the rule is being triggered when it is updated. It is, and usually it's updated by an individual or maybe the automation bot, then we can know exactly who made the last update on the ticket. Now, in a ticket, you can 100% see this information. So let's just go here in the history, right? So you can drill down and you can see, okay, who made these updates? But the request from the user was, can we, that rotated a little bit, is they want to surface it in the queue. So that's why, like, you might think, well, hey, you can just see this in the history. You can see who makes the changes. Yes, you can, but you can't surface this information up anywhere. So because they want to surface it in the queue, we need to write that to a custom field. And so that's what we're doing here. And quickly run update. And then let me show you what that looks like. So let me find one that I haven't tested on. Let's do this one. Okay, so updated by task. Let me add a label to this. So that's an update to the ticket. I can go back here and look at the log, and it was last run and it was successful. It's a very quick automation. Whereas the other one, there's some things that needs to be done. But if I go back here, we can see that this last updated by field was updated to me. That's great. That's exactly what we want to see. And then to the next step, we wanted to surface it in the queue. So they could edit the queue. And in this case, you can add the value or the custom field last updated by, and that will show up in the queues. And now we can see who was the last person to update this ticket. It doesn't tell you when the update was made, but every time that changes, if somebody else touched it or added a comment or whatever, that value would change to whoever made the update. So then that's how you can write a system information to a custom field through an automation. Again, this would be a high usage automation rule, but it would allow you to surface that information. So if you're on enterprise or premium, then this is a rule that you don't necessarily have to be concerned about it taking up your usage. Whereas if you're on standard, that's something to be mindful of, because it will, if you have high traffic in whatever project that this runs in, you're going to see your usage get eaten up real fast. So that's just something to keep in mind. So that's the second automation, which is, how do we write information to a custom field? Let me quickly go back to those rule details. Your trigger is going to be when the issue is updated, and then you're just going to edit the issue field. That custom field that we had to create, I chose to use the user picker. I could have used a text field, and then it could put the name of the initiator in that text field. But I like the ability to click on the user and filter. It's just it stays more controlled if you use a user in this case rather than text field. And that's how you would do that automation. Okay. Now, the next automation is all of this kind of increase in complexity, with the last updated being kind of the simplest, and then as they go up through that. So the next automation we're going to talk about is how to use smart values to parse domains from an email request. So if you're getting emails from customers and you're like, hey, if it comes in from this domain, then we want to do certain edits to that specific ticket. We want to adjust the request type so that it doesn't come in as whatever the email request is pointed to, that it adds maybe a component or adds the domain or company information to the summary or anything of that sort. And so I'm going to show you how to parse the domain out of an email from a sender on an email request. So the actual user request was parse emails coming in based on sender to set request type. So with this one, we'll need to use a smart value to read the domain of the email sender. And the trigger for this, let me go ahead and open it up, will be when an issue is created, but I've added a condition, and that condition is only for issues where they were created by email. I don't want to run this on anything that was created from the portal or within Jira itself, or even from the API. I only want it to run when and only when the request channel type is email. Now, if you weren't aware, let me just pull up a ticket. At the top, let's bring this back to center. At the top of, when you're in the details section, you can see the user raised this request via Jira, via email, via portal, via API. This is called, to call this value up or to do a search on it, it's the request channel type JQL value. And so if you were to pop into here and instead do, let's wait for this to clear, request channel type equals, and then you have, in this case, Jira, portal. If it's email, if it's the API, you can set that specific thing and then filter on that. Not everyone knows that you can filter specifically by the way it was, the channel it was raised in. So that's kind of helpful information to know. You can build filters off of that. So yeah, just a little side bit of information. So to parse the email, talked about how we're just going to do it by the specific request channel, email, and then we're going to branch it out for current issue. Now, the reason why I have used a branch here specifically is so we can add on to it. In this case, the request was like, hey, we want to update the request type based on the sender and who it has come from. If you have multiple domains from your reporters, you can, the assumption here is you're going to build on this rule, that you're going to want to expand on it. And so that's why I've used a branch here. If I wanted to expand on this, here's a little trick if you didn't know about it. I've got this whole component piece, or I guess branch built out. If I want to essentially do a very similar branch out here, but say a different email domain, I can simply click copy. But what it's going to do is it's going to copy that entire branch for me, and I can just click into each piece and adjust that information. And that's a really fantastic feature, because it wasn't always like that, and you'd have to build each one and set them every time, which meant if you had maybe a custom email template that you were using, you'd have to go up or have it in a side page that you have to copy and paste over. So that's just something to note, is that you can use this copy here and it will automatically copy all of that, and you can manipulate it for other future ones. So that's why I'm using branches. Is the intention, the assumption is you're going to have more than one condition on how you're going to edit in senders of that sort. So for this current issue, it's restricted to, again, the demo project. It's going to compare two values. So we're going to use a fairly complex smart value for our first value. And what this value is saying is that it's taking the email address of the reporter on the current issue. It's splitting it at the @ symbol, and then it's telling us to only take the last portion. So if the email is whitney@gmail.com, it is taking that email, it is using the @ symbol as the denominator, splitting it into two values, and then only taking the last value. And that's what the first value is and how we would compare it. So if you have, say you are getting emails from Google is one of your clients or whatever the case might be, you could put this in there and then say, for the current issue, if the domain equals, and in this case, we're going to test it with my email, which is grid.io instead of Google, or Gmail in this case. If it equals this domain, then do a series of actions. So I put in the second value, which is the domain that I want to set, where I know, hey, I get emails from this specific domain, and I want it to set the request type and add something to it. So beyond just editing the request type, because if you didn't know, with default of most Jira JSM projects, there is an email request type. So every email request that comes in gets set as this request type, and then you can update it and change it to maybe what it really is. Like if somebody sends an email to your help desk and note like about a system outage, or a hardware problem, or they need to onboard a new employee with different IT stuff, or even if it's not IT, they're just onboarding a new employee, but they send an email instead. We can use this to update that value. But then I've also added on, if you have an external help desk and you're getting stuff from external clients, and how you handle them internally is important. We've set it up so that it runs on that email domain and adds summary to it or whatever. So for the email address split is pretty important. So what I've done is I've said, okay, compare those two values. If those two values are true, then I want you to edit the summary. And I'm using the smart value issue summary, but I'm adding the grid.io domain to the front of the summary. I am also editing the request type to get IT help. I have chosen not to send an email when the issue is updated, just because it's not really useful to know, like, hey, your request type changed to the appropriate request type. I don't think that that's information that the user necessarily wants or needs or cares about, because if they did, they likely would be using the portal to select the very specific request type that they're submitting on. So I've just asked it to do a couple of things here, and let's go ahead and test that out. There it is. Okay, close this. So here's a test email, email demo test 1. We'll use my signature as the body. This is the email that we have for this specific project right now, and I'm going to send it. We're going to go here. theoretically, it should create the issue. Hopefully it does. Tested it and it did earlier. There it is. So here's our email demo task 1. Let's go ahead and look at this audit log. So it came in and it said it had success. So what it did is, let's expand. It edited the issue. So it did that successfully. And then it also edited the request type. So as you can see now, that initially it came in email demo task 1. I've added the domain to it. You can see the description, which was nothing. We can also look at the history and we can see, okay, it added that domain because it matched, and it also changed from emailed request to get IT help. And we've updated that information automatically just based on that email domain. So let me go back through this briefly. The trigger is going to be when an issue is created, and the condition is going to be when it's created via email. And then we're going to use a branch. And for the current issue, so the one that gets created and the current issue that triggers the automation, we're going to compare 2 values. We're going to parse the email address of the sender, and we're going to basically separate and only look at the domain piece of the email, and we're going to compare that to a second value. And then that value you can define directly in there. If it is true and matches, then we've said, okay, well, we want you to append the domain. In this case, you could potentially set a smart value for this domain, but we've basically said, okay, add grid.io ahead of the summary, and also edit the request type from the emailed request that it gets set as by default to get IT help. And then it runs. And as we showed with the audit log, we have success and we're good to go. So that's how you would do an automation to basically parse the email address of a sender to update the ticket that they created, update the request type, provide any edits to that issue. Okay, now the last one that the final automation we're going to show is how you can use SLAs and Jira automation rules to send reminders and auto close tickets. Now, this specific request was a best practice, like how do you automate reminders to customers to respond to requests for more information and to eventually close the ticket due to a lack of response from them. So ideally, we would want to account for X number of business days between each automated reminder attempt before eventually automatically closing out the request. Now, there are a few ways to do this, but natively, we'll need to do it with a few automation rules just due to Jira Cloud restrictions on calculating time, like when an SLA breaches, and then saying like, hey, it's been breached for 2 days, and then running something off of that. Jira natively doesn't have that ability to define like how long it's been breached. You could use the elapsed option. I found that for the sake of this webinar, it would be easier to kind of just show with 3 different automation rules that kind of work together. So in this case, it's going to be one that runs off of when the SLA actually breaches, and then it's going to be one that 2 others that will be scheduled, and then they'll have certain conditions on whether they run or not. Like if it's true, then they'll run. If it's not true, then it won't run. Okay, so the first thing that we do need to do is create a specific SLA. In this case, because this was like, hey, if the issue is sitting with the customer, it's been waiting for the customer for a long time, we want it to do something. So to track that, we need to create an SLA. For this SLA, I did the waiting for customer. and I wanted it to do for all. I did the target to being a very, very short period of time just for the sake of showing it. The specific request was for days, and so you could update that and then update the rules as well to match that time frame. But I've said, hey, for all issues, I want the waiting for customer. They should not be in that status for more than 5 minutes. It's going to start counting when it enters the status waiting for customer. It will finish counting when the ticket either moves from waiting for customer to in progress, say a side conversation happened, like maybe in the hallway or on Slack or Teams, and information from the customer was given to you there, and you just move it to in progress. It'll stop counting. It'll also stop counting when the ticket moves back to waiting for support, or if the resolution gets set, basically meaning that the ticket is closed. So that is where we've said, okay, for this SLA, this is how we want you to run. Now, because we have an SLA created, I can call on this SLA in our automation rules. So the first one is going to be the first reminder of like when it breaches. And in this case, the trigger is the SLA threshold breached. And I'm going to select the SLA the one we just created, which would be waiting for customer. And in this case, I have decided to do it when it breaches. You can also do it like, hey, if it is going to breach, maybe you want to let your agent know, like, hey, we're about to hit our time to first response breach, or SLA. If you can respond to the user or look at the ticket or whatever, that would be great. So there are a couple of options. In this case, I just used the breached option. And then split it out to a branch to run on the current issue, and then to add a comment. This is a reminder that we haven't heard from you in 3 days. Again, this will be based on whatever your SLA is, so you can update that accordingly. And then the thing that I have done is, one, I've prevented duplicates of only adding this comment once, and then I add a label. The label is important because that will help condition the next rules that are scheduled. In this case, because the request was based on days, I would choose to schedule the next, like the next reminder and then the auto close to run once a day in the morning. You could switch that to in the evening. You could switch, but I really encourage doing either start of day or end of day, and not necessarily the middle of the day. Because essentially, if it's the start of day or the end of day, that means that they've had the whole day to respond and they haven't. So you're just going to close it out, and you can either start your day out knowing like all of your tickets that are waiting for customer have either been closed automatically as needed, or another reminder has been sent out, and it's just one less thing that you have to worry about following up on. So this is the first of 3 rules. This specifically is going to run when that SLA that we put in place breaches. It's going to add a comment that's going to be visible to, let's make sure, to the customer, and then it's going to add a label, first reminder. So when that happens, let's see, do we have any? Okay, so this one breached. Let's look at that one. Started at the very beginning. Because it was initially not set for sharing with the customer, it became an internal note. Going forward, it would be public for the customer, which is important because you're reminding the customer that they need to respond. So I set it off, and this is a reminder, we haven't heard from you in 3 days. Make this whatever you need it to be for the sake of simplicity. That's just what I put. And then, as you can see, the labels for first reminder have gone in. Now the next 2 rules, this one's going to be our waiting for customer breached reminder, right? So we've got the one that actually breaches, there's a reminder. And then let's change this to second reminder. That makes more sense. And I've said, okay, when it's scheduled, I want you to run every 1 day at 6 in the morning. And then I've put in this JQL here to validate. There's none there, that's fine. That basically is like, hey, the status is still waiting for customer. The waiting for customer SLA has breached. It has the labels first reminder. and was updated like in the last 10 minutes. Honestly, like that part is not necessarily important. It's just in the sake of what we're doing here, because it's going to run daily and it's just not something that you have to worry about if you're doing it on days. So I'm going to say it has to match all of that. What that's going to do is it's going to restrict how many times this runs, or like how many issues it runs on, to basically make sure that it runs faster and not like going through every ticket, also with your automation usage. So we've restricted that. And then I said for the current issue, we're adding a second reminder. Hey, just another reminder, like if we don't hear from you soon, this ticket's going to auto close. And then we update the label from being first reminder to second reminder. If you can remember, in this JQL, we identified that it had the labels first reminder, because these values right here, the waiting for customer breached and status equals waiting for customer, ideally won't change. And so if we were to run just on that, it's going to get all of those issues, and we really only want to act on the issues where it is, the issues where that first reminder has already been sent out. Now, because this is a scheduled one, let me update. I'm going to go ahead and we're not going to wait till 6 in the morning tomorrow, but we're going to go ahead and run the rule. Let's look at the audit log. We can see that it's running. And in this case, we can see here, the label was changed to second reminder. Said, hey there, just another reminder, basically whatever we said that should be. And that is the second reminder that goes in place. So the first one is when it actually breaches, it's going to send that reminder out. The second one is going to be on your scheduled base and the JQL that we've written out to specify, hey, only run on these tickets. And then the third rule for this is going to be the closing the tickets that don't have a response. Again, we've scheduled it to go 6 in the morning, put in that JQL, and we've said instead that we're going to transition the issue to resolved. We're going to set the resolution. Now, I created a custom resolution for this so that we could run a report and say, like, how many of these issues the resolution is no response from the reporter. And so you can go in and create a custom resolution and then set that. And that's just the reason why I do it, is because, hey, you may want stats on how many tickets are we closing out because the user just doesn't respond. And then we'll add a comment that says, like, hey, this is being auto closed, and yada, yada, yada. If it's closed in error, please feel free to request for it to be reopened. And you'll share that comment with the customer. Again, we're not going to wait till 6 tomorrow morning, so I'm going to go ahead and run the rule. Now, that JQL was running on only issues that have that label second reminder, that were the SLA was breached, that the status was still waiting for customer. It had that second reminder, and then you could be like, and it hasn't been updated for, 5 days. You could put that in there. And now we would see, first let's look at the audit log here. Oh, I think because, let me make sure I did not, there's a specific thing. Let me clear that right now. Okay, now we will run it. Theoretically, this should then be a success, and this would get resolved. No response from reporter, and a comment that the ticket is being auto-closed because we've not received a response. You can still see that the second reminder label is on there. You could choose to clear that out when you auto-close it, or you can just leave it. That's fine. So then that is the final automation on how would you basically send multiple reminders to a user, like, hey, and this is just one way to do it. It's the way to do it natively. You'll need to create an SLA to specifically measure, like, okay, after, say 3 days, I want a reminder sent out. And then if we don't get any response within that first day, I, want a second reminder to go out. And then if we don't get any response after that, I want to close it. That you're going to have these 3 tickets that kind of work together and do all of those things. And it's just one less thing that you have to worry about to follow up on. You want to give your attention to the tickets where your users are responsive, that you're able to actively work on them, stuff that's in progress. Now, the final thing that I wanted to talk about is basically best practices for making sure your automation rules don't run on everything. Couple of ways to do this. You can, depending on what you're needing to do, if you don't want it to run on every issue, but it does need to touch every issue, like maybe there's a required field or maybe there's something that gets set, you can use your workflow and advanced workflow functionality to update issue types or different fields in an issue. That's one way, and that doesn't go against your automation count. You can also use, we did branching and the conditions. If you're in JSM, you can choose to, like on your request types, let's just fix an account problem. Say this request type, like needs to always have certain components or an assignee or different values always set. You can set those directly on the request type. Again, that won't go against your usage. And then actually doing it within the automation rule. I showed it a couple of times, specifically like here, you can say when the issue is created and has a condition, then run it. So you want to add in that condition so that it's not running on everything. Or you can, and the branches also help, where you can like create it and then the branches each have conditions, and so it's not one full long thing. It'll basically iterate through each branch and be like, hey, does this match? Nope. Does this match? Nope. And if it doesn't have any successful matches, it doesn't run, and therefore it won't go against your usage. Let's see, I think last updated by was the one that I mentioned would be a high usage unless you chose to put conditions on it. And so that's the best way of narrowing down automation rules, is using those condition functionalities. And then on the SLA breach, right, with this one, I also restricted it. Was it that specific one? Oh, it wasn't the breach. It was the reminder. So the scheduled ones, you can restrict the JQL on like what issues align with when this should be ran. So if you're just like, hey, schedule this, I want it to run every day at 6 a.m., but I don't restrict anything here, it's going to run every issue. And instead, you want it to only execute on the issues that you actually care to see. And in this case, we only care about the ones in which the SLA for waiting for customer is breached and the status for waiting for customer is still like what it is, in that jazz. And that helps make it only run when it is automatically just happening on the select few of issues that you want it to touch base on.